Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever noticed that sometimes silence says what words never can? We often think communication is about talking, explaining, convincing, arguing. But have you seen? The deepest pain is expressed in silence. The truest love is often shown in silence. And sometimes the greatest strength is when you choose to remain silent. Silence is not weakness. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is a language more powerful than words. Because words can lie, but silence cannot. Words may confuse, but silence clarifies. Today, I want to share with you why your silence is louder than your words, and how, if understood rightly, silence can become your greatest wisdom, your greatest power, and your greatest peace. My friends, have you noticed when people are hurt, they don't always say it in words? Sometimes their silence screams louder than any argument ever could. When someone you love stops talking to you, when they go quiet, when their eyes look away, that silence is not empty. It is full of emotions, full of pain, full of meaning. You see, silence has a way of revealing what words try to hide. Think about it. When someone is lying, their words may sound convincing, but their silence, their pauses, their hesitation, it speaks the truth. A child who has done something wrong may still say, "I didn't do it." But look at the silence in their eyes, the body language that avoids your gaze. The truth is written there without a single word. In relationships too, silence reveals what words conceal. A wife may say, "I'm fine, nothing's wrong," but her silence at the dinner table, her lack of laughter, her distant eyes, they reveal more than words ever could. A husband may say, "I'm okay," but his quiet nights, his deep sighs, his withdrawn presence, they are telling a story words never can. And have you noticed, even in love, silence reveals truth. Two people sitting together, not saying a single word, yet feeling completely connected. That silence is louder than "I love you," repeated 100 times. Because when the bond is real, you don't always need words. Silence reveals truth because silence cannot be faked. Words can be manipulated. Words can be rehearsed. Words can be painted beautifully to cover the cracks. But silence is raw. Silence is authentic. Silence is honest. So, the next time you are with someone, don't just listen to what they say. Listen to what they don't say. Because silence is not nothing, it is everything. It is the language of truth. It is the sound of the soul. So many times in life, people mistake silence for weakness. They say, "Oh, he didn't respond, he must be scared. She didn't argue, she must be weak." But the truth is, my friends, silence is not weakness. Silence is strength. Think about it. When someone insults you, your natural instinct is to react, to defend yourself, to shout back, to prove your point. But have you noticed? It takes far more strength to remain silent than to react in anger. Anyone can lose their temper. Anyone can throw words around carelessly. But only the strong can sit quietly, breathe deeply, and not let the chaos disturb their inner peace. I'll share a story with you. Once, a wise monk was walking through a village. A man came and began to hurl abuses at him. He insulted him, called him names, shouted at him. The monk stood there quietly without a word. After some time, the man got tired and left. The monk's disciple asked, "Guruji, why didn't you reply? Why didn't you defend yourself?" And the monk smiled and said, "If someone brings you a gift and you don't accept it, who does the gift belong to? It belongs to the giver." In the same way, if someone gives you anger, insults, and hatred, and you don't accept it, it stays with them, not with you. That is not weakness, my friends. That is strength. To not let others control your emotions. To not let their words dictate your peace. You see, silence is not about having nothing to say. Silence is about having the strength to choose when to say and when not to say. A sword is sharp, but a wise warrior doesn't use it every time. In the same way, words are powerful, but a wise person knows when silence is far more powerful. Even in relationships, silence is strength. Sometimes walking away from an argument, staying calm instead of shouting, holding back instead of reacting, requires more courage than fighting back. Because silence is not running away. Silence is standing tall with dignity. The world will tell you, speak up, prove yourself, defend yourself. But sometimes the loudest proof of your character is your silence. Your silence shows you don't need validation. Your silence shows you are in control. Your silence shows you are strong. So remember this: weak people react immediately. Strong people choose wisely. And the strongest people often choose silence. My friends, how many of you have ever said something in anger, in frustration, and later regretted it? Words are powerful. They can heal, but they can also hurt. And once spoken words cannot be taken back. They remain like scars in someone's heart. Have you noticed? When we are angry, we don't think clearly. Our mind is clouded. Our ego is on fire. And in that moment, we feel the urge to say something sharp, something cutting, something that will prove our point. And yes, it might make us feel victorious for a few seconds. But later, when the storm has passed, when the anger cools down, regret enters. We think, why did I say that? I didn't mean it. But by then, the damage is already done. There's an old saying, words are like arrows. Once released, they cannot be taken back. Silence, my friends, prevents that regret. If only in the heat of the moment, we choose silence. If only we take a pause, breathe deeply, hold back, then later we won't have to say, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. Let me share a simple example. Imagine a husband and wife. They are arguing over something small, maybe about finances, maybe about family. The husband is angry. The wife is upset. In that moment, one harsh word can destroy the peace of the entire evening. One sentence spoken without control can damage trust for years. But if one of them chooses silence instead, the argument loses its fuel. The fire dies down. And later, when both are calm, they can talk with love instead of anger. Silence saved them from regret. It's the same in friendships. One rude reply, one sarcastic remark, one impatient response can end years of bonding. But silence gives you time. Time to think. Time to choose wisely. Time to protect the relationship. And you know, even in our professional life, silence protects us. Many people lose jobs, break trust, or damage their reputation simply because they spoke too quickly. They reacted without thinking. But the one who pauses, the one who stays silent until the right words are found, that person earns respect. Silence is not the absence of communication. Silence is intelligent communication. Silence says, I value this relationship more than my ego. Silence says, I'd rather hold back than regret later. So remember this: when angry, be silent. When unsure, be silent. When you feel the urge to attack, be silent. Because silence today saves tears tomorrow. Silence now saves regret later. My friends, have you noticed in today's world, everyone wants to be heard, but very few are willing to listen. We live in a time where people are quick to speak, quick to respond, quick to argue. Everyone wants to prove themselves right. Everyone wants the last word. But you see, true respect is not in speaking more. True respect is in knowing when to remain silent and simply listen. When someone is sharing their pain with you, they don't always need your advice. They don't always need your solution. Sometimes they just need your silent presence. They just need to know that you are listening, not with your mouth, but with your heart. Think about it. When a friend comes to you crying, hurting, broken, and you interrupt with, "Do this, don't do that, you should have done better," you are not respecting their emotions. But when you sit silently, nodding gently, holding their hand, letting them pour their heart out, that silence is the highest form of respect. Because it says, your feelings matter, your words matter, you matter. Even in families, silence speaks respect. When parents are talking, a respectful child listens quietly. When elders share their wisdom, interrupting them is disrespectful, but patiently listening in silence is honoring them. In relationships too, silence is a gift of respect. A husband who listens silently to his wife's worries is showing respect. A wife who listens silently to her husband's struggles is showing respect. Because respect is not about agreeing with everything. Respect is about giving space for the other person to be heard, without judgment, without interruption. I'll share a story with you. Once, a young man asked his teacher, "What is the best way to show love and respect to others?" The teacher smiled and said, "Close your mouth and open your ears." The boy laughed, but later realized that silence in listening is the deepest respect we can give. Even in our spiritual life, silence shows respect. When we pray, when we meditate, when we sit quietly before the divine, we are showing reverence. We are saying, "I am here to listen, not to demand." Silence becomes worship. You see, silence is not ignoring. Silence is not indifference. Silence is respect. It is saying, "I value you enough to listen. I honor you enough to not interrupt. I respect you enough to give you my silence." So, remember this, my friends. The next time someone is speaking to you, don't rush to reply. Don't jump in with your opinion. Instead, pause, be silent, listen. Because silence is not just golden. Silence is respect. My friends, have you ever noticed when life hurts you the most, words often fail? When the pain is too deep, when the wound is invisible, when the heart is heavy, silence becomes the only medicine. We often think healing means talking it out, explaining, complaining, expressing. But sometimes healing comes not from saying more, but from saying nothing. Silence allows the heart to breathe again. Silence gives the mind space to untangle itself. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is therapy. Think of nature. When you walk into a forest, or sit quietly by the ocean, or simply watch the stars in silence, don't you feel lighter? Don't you feel your stress dissolving, your worries fading away? Nature heals us not with words, but with silence. The rustling of the leaves, the stillness of the night, the quiet sound of waves. They don't speak, yet they heal. There's a story of a man who was going through deep grief. He had lost someone he loved dearly. His friends kept coming, offering words of comfort. "Don't cry, stay strong, it will be fine." But nothing worked. Their words only made him feel more misunderstood. But then one old friend came, sat next to him, and said nothing. He just sat in silence, holding his hand. And for the first time, the grieving man felt peace. He later said, "That silence healed me more than 1,000 words." Even in our own lives, haven't we felt this? After a long, stressful day, instead of talking, you just sit quietly. No phone, no TV, no conversations, just silence. And suddenly, your mind feels clearer, your heart feels calmer. That is the healing power of silence. You see, words can reopen wounds. Words can scratch old scars. But silence allows them to close. Silence allows forgiveness to grow, patience to deepen, and pain to soften. Even doctors agree silence reduces stress, lowers blood pressure, improves focus. Silence is not just spiritual healing, it is physical healing too. And in relationships, silence heals as well. After a fight, sometimes instead of more arguments, what is needed is a little silence. That pause, that stillness, gives both people space to reflect, to cool down, to come back with love instead of ego. Without that silence, the wound would grow. But with silence, healing begins. And finally, silence heals us spiritually. In prayer, in meditation, in sitting quietly with God, we allow our soul to recover from the noise of the world. In silence, we hear the whisper of peace, the voice of love, the presence of the divine. So, my friends, when your heart is heavy, when your mind is noisy, when life feels unbearable, don't always run to words. Don't always run to noise. Instead, choose silence. Because silence does not ignore your pain, silence heals it. My friends, have you ever noticed silence has a way of slowing us down? In silence, we learn something very rare in today's world: patience. We live in a world of speed. Fast internet, fast food, fast replies. We are always rushing to speak, rushing to respond, rushing to succeed. And in this rush, we forget one of the greatest virtues of life: patience. Silence is the teacher of patience. When you hold your tongue in an argument, when you wait before replying, when you choose to breathe instead of react, that silence is teaching you patience. It is saying, not everything needs an instant answer. Not every problem needs an instant solution. Not every emotion needs an instant reaction. Think of a seed. When you plant it in the soil, does it grow into a tree overnight? No. It stays hidden, silent, in the dark for days, weeks, months. But in that silence, it is learning patience. It is growing roots. It is preparing for strength. And one day it breaks through the ground, tall and strong. The silence of the seed gave it patience, and patience gave it life. In our lives too, silence plays this role. When we don't get the job we want, when a prayer seems unanswered, when a dream is delayed, silence teaches us patience. It whispers, wait, trust, your time will come. Without silence, we would give up too quickly. But silence helps us endure. Let me share a story. A disciple once asked his master, "Why does God not answer my prayers quickly?" The master smiled and took him to a bamboo forest. He said, "Look at these trees. The bamboo spends years growing silently underground where no one can see it. But when it finally rises, it grows faster and stronger than almost any other tree. God's silence is like that. It is not absence. It is preparation. It is teaching you patience. Even in relationships, silence teaches patience. A wife may wait silently for her husband to change a habit. A parent may silently endure a child's mistakes, waiting patiently for them to learn. That silence is not weakness. It is patience born of love. And in our spiritual journey, silence is the deepest training ground for patience. When we sit in meditation, in prayer, in stillness, we fight the restlessness of our own mind. We want results quickly. We want peace instantly. But silence slowly stretches our inner strength, teaching us to wait, teaching us to endure, teaching us to grow. You see, patience is not simply waiting. Patience is waiting with trust. Silence creates that trust. It tells you, you don't have to rush. Life is unfolding exactly as it should. So, my friends, when life feels delayed, when answers don't come, when situations test your endurance, don't see silence as a punishment. See it as a teacher. Because silence is the classroom and patience is the lesson. My friends, have you ever noticed in the loudest moments of life, our mind becomes the most confused, but in silence, clarity arrives. In silence, wisdom speaks. The human mind is like a lake. When the water is disturbed, when waves are crashing, when the surface is restless, you cannot see clearly. But when the lake becomes still, suddenly you can see your own reflection. Life is the same. When our mind is noisy with arguments, opinions, distractions, we cannot hear the voice of wisdom. But when we enter silence, the noise settles and wisdom rises. Have you ever wondered why some of the greatest thinkers, saints, and leaders of history valued silence so much? Because they knew wisdom is not found in noise, it is born in stillness. Think about it. When you are constantly speaking, constantly reacting, constantly surrounded by sound, you cannot process deeply. You only skim the surface. But silence gives you time to reflect. Silence gives you space to think before you act, to weigh before you decide, to understand before you respond. That is wisdom. There is a story of a king who once asked his wise minister, "How can I make better decisions for my people?" The minister took him to a quiet forest at dawn. As the king stood there in silence, the minister said, "Do you hear the wisdom of the forest?" The king frowned. "I hear nothing." The minister smiled. "Exactly. In silence, you stop hearing the noisy and you start hearing yourself. That is where wisdom lives. Even in our own lives, haven't we experienced this? We are worried, confused, stressed. We ask friends, we search online, we keep talking about our problem.